Hello and welcome to the Livable Cities interview series, where we engage in conversations with changemakers from around the world. Today, I'm joined by Farah Naz, author and director of ESG and Innovation Buildings and Places for the Middle East and Africa at AECOM. Farah also sits on our advisory board for LiveableCitiesX, which, by the way, is taking place from 26th to 28th of November 2024 at the Dubai World Trade Center. Make sure you're attending our event this year. Farah, what an absolute pleasure having you with us here today.
Thank you for having me, Ranju.
Now, it's amazing to see you after such a long time, and we are going to be talking about something very important and very pertinent to today's time and era. And as we talk about livable cities, we know it is important to start off with climate change, which is certainly presenting significant challenges to livability as a whole. And I'm sure you would agree with me. But what are some of these strategies that you think should be implemented to ensure that our cities are resilient to environmental stress and natural disasters?
Thank you so much for the question. So by we, I mean globally, we're at the midst of a climate emergency, which was declared in 2019. And globally, and especially in this part of the world, we have started seeing the effects of climate change. As per UAE's climate data, we show that this part of the world is going to have higher temperatures, but we're going to also have a lot of rains and torrential storms and cyclones. So if we are going to look at two things that needs to be done in the Gulf region. First is how to create livable cities with a climate resiliency plan. That means for the infrastructure, for our buildings and for our communities, when we look at a city level strategies for climate change, climate adaptation plan and climate mitigation plan has to be a very important part of it. And you can see that Sheikh Mohammed just announced the drain that's going to come, like the water system. And that's also a very strong part of the climate adaptation plan. The second thing is the education and awareness. We need more conferences and places and platforms where knowledge are shared between the industry experts and the future leaders and the youth. So a conference that you are holding and this movement is absolutely amazing because it allows the knowledge sharing, the cross-pollination of ideas from industry experts, young people, current mid-year or graduates and university professionals, and that cross-pollination of ideas is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, because you mentioned about cross-pollination there, Farah. I mean, I know you would agree that developing resilient cities of the future requires a collective effort. It is always collaboration and it comes down to that. But how do you think should the many different sectors of the ecosystem collaborate to enhance the livability of cities, especially for our future generations?
So collaboration can happen in very different ways for different people and entities. But the first thing, what I call is co-creation, bringing a set of people together from young people, different sectors and disciplines, multidisciplinary, and create a core body who can ideate on things and technologies, how problem could be solved with effective technology integration. So that co-creation of ideas is very important. The second part is implementation of these co-creation ideas in real life context. We call it pilot case studies. So that's where the government entities, the private and public sector can come to provide funding, select the best ideas. It's kind of like the dragon's den of ideas, but instead of a business idea, it's more of a city resiliency or a city livability idea that benefits the entire community and the city and the government and the country itself. So first level, as I say, co-creation. Second idea is the implementation. And third, we really must test the idea to a 6 to 9 months basis as a pilot study and understand what have we learned and what we didn't learn and where we failed. You know, we as a community always like to look at the successes of things, but from the failures we can understand a lot of things, and especially when you're implementing a new idea for a new city, the pilot case studies shows a lot of failure factor, and from there opportunities and challenges can rise, which can really work positively. So I think these three things, co-creation of ideas, implementing ideas, learning from the pilot case studies, the positives and negatives, and then looping it back to the construction sector, this feedback loop of knowledge is very, very important. And we are seeing a small scale of these happening globally in different parts of the world and here in the region.
Thank you for that, and I think that brings me to a very important question here. When we talk about creating cities, we always talk about generating economic, environmental, and social value. But that has also become one of the greatest challenges of the future. What role do you think can policy changes play in supporting the overall urban infrastructure of our cities while considering these three key principles?
So 10 years ago, we used to call it smart cities, and now we call it climate smart city. So for any city to become climate smart, we have to be very conscious of the changes, how to keep the city relevant. Many times a policy comes to act, but the policy doesn't get updated or changed for a certain time. And what we are seeing globally and this part of the world, a policy change is very important. So for example, after COP28 in January, UAE government issued the net zero long-term strategy. In UK, the government just adopted a net zero strategy as well. So what we are seeing globally is that integration of policy with decarbonization and net zero energy transition is very important. And secondly, we must keep these policies relevant. So for in 2 years' time, we might have a new technology, the whole landscape of decarbonization might change. So the idea is to have new policies, but also keep it very relevant and very updated every 2 years. So we always are at the up of the game in terms of decarbonization, because these are all new things globally in this part of the world. So we must be aligned with the technological changes, but also the political and the policy changes. So everything comes together as a nice story to make vision reality.
Because you mentioned about new things that are obviously supporting the decarbonization agenda around the world, another new thing is obviously innovation in master planning. What
Yes.
are your thoughts on how we can actually enhance the livability index of cities and improve the quality of life of the inhabitants, by working on innovating the whole master planning process?
So a few years ago, when I was leading the sustainability for Museum of the Future, we worked with this concept called inclusive integrated innovation. And what it is, it's a combination of social innovation, business innovation, and technical innovation. So when we are looking at innovation in a city scale, it's very important to create an innovation ecosystem. It's very important to have an innovation roadmap that aligns with the city's needs and wants and the growth of the city. Specifically, as Dubai wants to become smart city, the question is, how do we become the next climate smart city? And innovation and technology will always play an important role, because that's how you become what you are not or what you could become. So the implementation of innovation takes, of course, funding. The technology needs to be there. People need to understand the business model of innovation. If we are risk averse and we are thinking the same way we are doing business modeling for sustainability innovation, which we used to do 5-6 years ago, that model doesn't really work. Innovation really requires new ecosystem of peoples and entrepreneurs coming together, and we need small experimentation. So that's why the pilot case studies are very important. If there's an innovative solution, to apply it in a small city level to see what's the benefits, and take the lessons learned to update the policy and the future projects. That feedback loop of knowledge is so important, specifically when we are trying to decarbonize our cities, when we are trying to use innovation as a vehicle to make livable cities. So I think it's an ecosystem of knowledge, experience, ideas, experimentation, logistics, governance, everything comes together to create a coherent roadmap which is real for a city.
That's a very interesting response there, Farah. And I think it takes me to a very pertinent question here. And this is something that we cannot forget to talk about when we're talking about livable cities, is the 5 capital models of sustainable development.
Yes.
How do you think can we integrate it better in order to make sure that our cities for the future are actually livable and resilient?
So I work with 5 capital model of sustainability for many of our master planning projects and for building projects. Museum of the Future, Expo Terra Sustainability Pavilion, BIA headquarters, all of them has that, we did the modeling to understand, okay, how do we bring these different capitals and connect it together to create something truly amazing? So I think what's important is to understand and have the vision. If we keep on doing what we did before, it's not going to work. As we can see, the climate is changing. When UAE was having floods, China and India and other places were having severe flood events. This year, when I was in Milan, Milan was hotter than Dubai. And this is something we're going to see more often. So the idea is to create a coherent roadmap, understand why we are trying to do something, what is the benefit, create the business model for sustainability. Right now, it's becoming so relevant, especially with the technology integration, with the growing demand of population, tourism. We really need to understand how we create this food, energy, and water nexus, the interrelationship of these three things. And that's where the capital model comes in, because it's a financial model, it's a human capital model, it's a social model. And when we do a modeling of a city plan, for example, in all these layers, we really allow and create a business case for the investors. We create a business case for the developers and for the buyers. And everybody understands the value chain. So in order to integrate a solid business case for net zero transition, in order to create a supply chain to support us in this transition, it's very important to change our mindset shift. So 5 capital model is essentially a mindset shift of a growth mindset and taking an existing economic model and applying it in a very consistent manner.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Farah. It was such a pleasure having you with us and obviously conversing about such an important topic for all of us here today. And I really look forward to continuing on this conversation at the LiveableCitiesX event later in the year.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a brilliant conversation and really look forward to seeing innovative minds and everybody to come and join this movement with all of us on the day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again. Well, to our viewers, make sure you follow us on all of our social media channels at LiveableCitiesX. And don't forget to join the movement hashtag I am a city change maker and tell your stories about how you are making a change in your cities and making it better for the future generations. Thank you once again and goodbye.